Give it a couple minutes here to get everybody settled.
Denise,
Yes.
Tana asked me to volunteer to
Yes.
do, if my voice is going in and out, and I'm certainly happy to do that. But if there's someone else that maybe wants to, that would be great.
I totally hear it there in your voice, my friend. So I don't know which staff person we have lined up with you, but that staff person can definitely take the lead and help you out.
Thank you.
My guess it's probably Tana. Because you girls work so well together. All right, the waiting room's starting to slow down a little bit. So we might be getting about everybody in. Give it just a couple more seconds here. Well, again, welcome this afternoon, everyone. I am Denise Sweener with Buffalo County Community Partners, and I would like to start us off by inviting you all to post your name and your title, organization, or your passion in the chat box. Make sure and share a little bit about yourself so people can kind of get to know you if this is the first time they've happened to see your name and your face. Welcome to this meeting. We're very excited to have you here to join us. And some of you I know have been traveling this journey with us for the last few months, and some of you have been with us a very long time, and some of you are just now joining us for the first time. So we reach out to all of you, tell you thank you for joining us. Very grateful to have you here. And I'm going to pass it off to our chairman of the Buffalo County Community Partners Board, Nadia Saeed.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And we are excited for this meeting and to see the steps that we can take together in moving this process forward. So what we are going to start out with, if I can have Matt switch to our next. Thank you. So our purpose today is threefold. First is to confirm a name for this group and to clarify our work, what our work will be moving forward. The second is to really just review some of the work that we have done to date. So we'll start out with just a quick refresher of the work that we have done and the themes that we have talked about. And the last thing, which we will do in some breakout groups, is to determine the structure of the collaborative with some details in those theme areas. So that is the purpose for today's meeting. And again, thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. And I hope that that your intentions and your hopes for this meeting are validated today. Please don't hesitate to ask any questions or throw some suggestions out if you feel that there is a more helpful way to go through these items. So I'm going to kick it back to Denise, and she is going to take it from there.
Thank you, Nadia. We're going to just refresh our knowledge on the work that we've done to date. So our next slide begins talking a little bit about the collective impact model that has been approved by, I would say, the majority of you guys on this call. This is conversations we've had for several months now, and we have adopted this model as a community. And so if this is the first time you're seeing the model, I encourage you to Google collective impact and do some light reading on that. Very interesting work out in the communities across the United States, actually worldwide. But what we're looking to do is to align our work to achieve greater impact. We use language like moving from good to great, or to ensuring that the work we're doing is making the intended impact that we're all wanting to make together, having a shared agenda, aligning our data to be able to share what we're doing together as partners. So some of you have been in this work for quite some time, have seen some of that in process. However, we're going to evolve into even a greater collective impact community as we move forward with the proposed work we have in front of you today. So collective impact is one model. The next slide is the other model that you all have approved, which is the results-based accountability model. So this piece marries very well with collective impact. It's about how well we do the work that we do collectively. So if we think about, I use this example every time, it's like a consistent example and it works really well because it's simple. During the pandemic, we had several people who were needing food. We ended up bringing in a truckload of food every Thursday. We would hand out 1,200 food boxes. And so we begin to ask ourselves that first question in the results-based accountability model. How much did we do? We delivered 1,200 food boxes every week, and we could track that. And we did a great job. I mean, that was a lot of hard work, great impact, something we can measure. The next question of that model says, how well did we do it? Well, gosh darn it, we did a really good job, because we know that we managed traffic. We got boxes out to employers. I know there's childcare centers here on the call too. We helped coordinate with childcare centers so that we were getting food through the centers to families. And we really think we did a fantastic job, and we improved our performance when we said, how well did we do it and how could we do that better? So the next question of that model digs even deeper. And this is the question you're going to hear from us more and more often. Is anyone better off because they received that food box? So did we help anybody overcome food insecurity? Today, are they still needing that food box? Or were we able to help them in supports for employment? Or were there other pieces that they were needing at that time that could have helped them be sustainable with food? And did we miss that opportunity? And how could we have achieved even greater impact with improving skills, attitudes, behaviors, and circumstances? So that's where we're headed. Again, we want to just recognize we're doing great work, but that third question in this model really creates a time for us to pause and reflect and say, are we doing the best that we can for people in our community? So that's our second model, results-based accountability. You can Google that as well, and there's a lot of great stuff out there. Next slide. So about I'm going to say 3 years ago, prior to the pandemic, we did have a steering committee that come together. They looked at all the data that we currently had collected. They put them into a list. We talked about that as a community, tried to decide which pieces of data were most important. And so we have this document. If anybody's interested in seeing it, we're also looking at posting this on our website. Michelle Tucon's working on that from her home away from home in Lake Placid today. Do you want to away from Lake Placid today, Michelle? Yes, she is doing a little skeleton work in Lake Placid. So she is also working on our website, and some of this information will be available soon on the site. So the reason we're sharing these pieces with you is just to refresh that there has been a data dive. There is data that's been brought forward. We've collected them into 4 different areas. So this is the first area around behavioral health. And you can see within there, we have data that's been collected on suicide, depression, anxiety, mental wellness, and substance abuse. And the next slide, Matt, is data around early childhood and adolescence. So these are where we're measuring more of those protective factors for youth, social, emotional development, early childhood factors that really help, that we know if children have those pieces in place early on, that they're going to be much more successful in the long run of life. So that is the early childhood adolescent section of the data. The third section is access to basic services. So when I kind of talk about those food pieces, this would be where we would count the number of food boxes going out, those basic services. Also, access to mental health services, access to some substance abuse prevention programs, access to health care, affordable housing, and food. So those are the data pieces in that section. And the final section and fourth section of that work is vulnerable, I can't say that word today, persons. So that would be those who are living in poverty, children, the percent of children living in poverty. We also have in there, I believe, sorry, it's so small, Matt, I'm trying to kind of guess. I think it was unemployment rates. I believe high school graduation rates are in there. But again, this is all in information that would have been sent out to you guys in advance. So if you're following along on the PowerPoint that was sent in the email, you're more than welcome to do that. So these are the data dives. We're calling this document our community wellness indicator document. So the data is available for people to look at. The next section that we want to talk about as we continue to refresh where we've been, because we've done a lot of work in the last year. We set a goal to advance innovative solutions to complex social issues. And that the innovative solutions, we look to this collective impact model, and that results-based accountability is some of those innovative ideas to move work forward. And I think we all know that prevention is a much different animal today than it was. I know when I started 25 years ago, we were saying words like say no to drugs, or this is your brain on drugs. And it's a much different environment today with vaping and opioids and laced, what do I want to say, the opioid laced narcotics. So there's just so many different things available today that are at a great risk for youth and adults. So the complexity is much more evolved than what we were doing, even 5 years ago. The next slide then digs a little bit deeper. These are the 4 areas that we have discussed as a community. And I know I'm going to just guess that 90% of you have had time to talk through these pieces. So last year we had 60 volunteers who came to our board meeting and answered questions about what is your hope around behavioral health, or what is your hope for vulnerable people in our community? What is your hope around access? What is your hope for children or adolescents? From that, we pulled together these 4 themes. And I don't think these are new to any of you, but the 4 themes that we are continuing to hold center to this work is that we will have resources that are easy to understand and accessible for all, that we will have access to basic services for all residents. We will thrive when partners work together to coordinate services, and we value all people and their voices will inform the work. So those are like our guiding principles, our vision statements to really hold us accountable as a community moving forward to 2030. So the next slide gets into more of what you shared as hopes with the board. So these are what we're defining as the gaps. And I'm not going to go through all of those because we have done that in previous meetings. And this information is available anytime you want to look at these slides as well as other documents. So just let us know. This is the access gaps and barriers that have been identified. Good Lord, I'm getting tongue-tied. These are the gaps and barriers for access. The next slide, I believe, are the barriers and gaps to the coordinated services. And I think the next one has 2 slides with valuing people. So you can see how they all align. So that is a refresher. That is where we have been the last year to year and a half, maybe even 2 years, I could say. We've been doing all this work via Zoom. So congratulations, pat yourself on the back. We've done some really, really good work over Zoom, and we've found out that this tool can be very effective. I'm going to hand it back to Nadia because now we're going to roll up our sleeves and start making some decisions as a group. So Nadia.
All right, thanks, Denise. So the next step is really to confirm a name for this group. And initially, as we've been going, we've been calling it a collaborative. However, there was some conversation that really we need to define that our collaborative, the concern of the collaborative is wellness. And so as Denise has covered some of those areas, wellness falls into, can be defined in many different ways. And so this is the proposed name for the collaborative, Buffalo County Wellness Collaborative. And we really just need confirmation from this group that is an acceptable name moving forward. And I believe, well, first, if there's any conversation, if anybody has any questions or suggestions, but then I think Matt has a poll for us.
Actually, I think it's me, so let me catch up here.
Oh, that's okay. So you may have heard, Denise just dropped this in the chat, but you may have heard we called this a super coalition at some point. So we've kind of bounced around, but really just in solidifying the work that we're doing, it's important that we solidify a name for this group. So I see some thumbs up.
I'm going to go ahead and launch the survey so that you can go ahead and vote if you think this is a good title for the work right now moving forward. I want to let you know that this is your work, right? So if it's any point as we move forward that you feel that that name isn't quite fitting the work that you're doing as a collaborative, then we can sure have a conversation about what that might be different. I also want to make sure that as we're naming this, we're also claiming the authority to do all of the work that we just went through, right? All of that, those models, the themes, the gaps, that work is owned by this collaborative, right? This is work that you've done to this point. So it's really important that we start to name the group and the people who come and go through this process to help support the work. Getting a few more votes coming in. And Matt, now I have a technical problem. Oh, there it goes. Okay. I couldn't move my screen. Okay. I think, are you now seeing the results of the survey? 95% of you would agree at this point in time, moving forward with this name of Buffalo County Wellness Collaborative. I do see Joanna Murray has joined us. She also made a suggestion that maybe using the word well-being versus wellness might be of interest. And Lisa's also kind of questioning basic services meeting the wellness definition. So yeah, we originally had just Buffalo County Collaborative. And as you'll soon hear with this next conversation, we've started a steering committee to help just collect the information to help support your process as a much larger group. And so their recommendation was to add wellness in there. So I think with the vote we've gotten so far, let's move forward with this for right now, knowing that we can make tweaks and changes to this at any time and just reach out to any one of us on staff or Nadia or Joanna, and we'd be very willing to have additional conversations with you about that. Okay. Next slide.
All right, so to go along with defining our work, this is a sample structure that the board, as well as the steering committee, has reviewed. There were several different structures, but this is the one that we have landed on to this point. So just to walk you through, and that was part of your packet. So if you do have any questions later, if you want to go back and review it, like Denise said, this is just a starting point. So if at any point you do have questions or suggestions, this is your work. And so we're happy to have those conversations. So starting out, Buffalo County Community Partners Board, on the bottom there is the backbone and the fiscal agent for this collaborative. The Backbone organization uses the collective impact framework to help support the collaborative. Then you have, the fiscal agent provides, so they would provide, community partners would provide your grant management and compliance and would work closely with leadership and coordination with the steering committee. The steering committee will provide the strategic vision and support to help ensure that the collaborative has what it needs for success. And you've been with us on this whole, this past year in this process, but this is really where we saw that overarching vision, looking at all the different parts of the collaborative and how they work together, how they could work better together, falls into place. So really the intention of that steering committee is just to provide that strategic vision and support for the collaborative. So then within the collaborative, we have working groups in those different theme areas that we have talked about: behavioral health, vulnerable populations, access, and then children and adolescents. And you see how those groups do overlap, because none of them function independently of each other. There is crossover in those theme areas, and so they are not separate. So the full collaborative, with participation from you and work groups in the community, with their focus on these priority areas. Any feedback right off the bat? We will go into small groups to discuss some of this, but does anybody have any thoughts to share initially here?
Also, if you do have a question, feel free to raise your hand, and we can sure call on you too if you're a little shy about making comments in front of everyone that's available on screen. I would also say that Nadia and I had the opportunity to look at a bunch of different models that hold collective impact work in the work. And we reviewed many of those and have landed on this one to share with the group. The steering committee got a chance to look at it last week and put their blessing on it. They wanted to look at some of the other examples that Nadia and I had already reviewed just to make sure. So we did send those out. So if anybody else wants to look at what some of those other models might look like, we're very willing to share. I will say that other models had the circles of behavioral health, access, children and adolescents, and vulnerable populations outside the Wellness Collaborative. And we just felt like it was really important to have those conversations within the large collaborative. So the collaborative was still holding all of that work accountable. So just to give you a little bit more background on how we got to this model. So let's go to the next slide, unless you had anything else you wanted to share, Nadia.
I am good. I didn't know if Joanna had anything that she wanted to add to this part. If not, we're good to move forward.
Oh, so yeah, the next slide was just showing that we would propose, and we haven't moved this forward yet, but we're just throwing out the idea that the work and the coalitions and your organizations could move forward into 4 working groups this year. So we're just kind of throwing out those themes. We don't need to make those decisions today, but we just wanted to kind of start introducing these 4 areas as potential working groups for our community within this collective or within this collaborative. The next slide, yes, is our breakout. So many of the steering committee members who met last week, I believe there's 5 or so on this call, less Jessica with her laryngitis, but I think there's 4 or 5 of them that are willing to facilitate our next breakout. So we're going to break out in groups of probably 8 to 10 people. Matt is going to randomly select or put people into groups. So there's no rhyme or reason why you're landing in what group. And so you will have one of those steering committee facilitators. So I am excited that you'll get to meet them and talk a little bit about the model. What we would like you to consider are these 3 questions when you arrive in that breakout. What do you like about this model? So just talk amongst yourselves about what you like about the model. Do you see your work if you're a member of a coalition, or are you a childcare provider, or maybe you're just an individual retired person in the community who is passionate about making sure people have access to food? Do you see your work in this model and how others could partner with you? So that's your second question. And then what is missing from the model? When you think about this work, what's missing? So that's what we want to talk about for 15 minutes. And I think we're ready to start going into breakouts. We will come back as a full group and report out. So I'll encourage those steering committee facilitators to either report back themselves or ask if somebody else would like to do the report back to the large group. So Matt, let's enter breakout rooms and have a conversation about these 3 questions. And Michelle, could I lean on you to drop the questions you already have? The questions are in the chat. All right, we're ready to go. Good luck,
All right, everybody. Like Denise said, there should be about 8 to 10 of you in each group. It should automatically put you in a group, and then I will, one quick second, we just had somebody join. All right. So it should automatically put you in the group, and then I'll pull you back after about 15 minutes, but you should have roughly a minute or 2 to finish up a thought before it officially closes you out. So I'll go ahead and open those up and see you back here in 15.
Joanna, do you have, is Joanna back yet? Maybe Joanna's not back yet.
I'm here.
You are. Do you have 15 minutes to facilitate this breakout response, or do you need to get going?
I have to jump at 1:30, maybe 1:28. So I can start if you want to co-do that together.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
And how, just remind me, Matt, how many groups did we have?
5?
5.
We had 5. I'll post in the chat who was in each.
Yeah, just so I can see who to call on first. So just because I was with her group, why don't I call on Abby? And you'll hear this, folks, as we go through the report outs, you're going to hear similar things. And so what might make us a little efficient is when I call the 3rd and 4th and 5th group, if you would just add what else, like what haven't you heard so far that might be unique to the conversation. That way we can gather those unique ideas as well. So why don't I, Abby, can I go to you first, just because I know that you were one of our leads, to just give us an overview of some of the thoughts on those 3 questions?
That's fine. Yes. So good afternoon. Our group, we did overall collectively appreciate the model for what it is. We feel like the model is welcoming for others to be able to give input into the collaborative. As we all know, there's no one size fits all or cookie cutter. So we do appreciate the interconnectedness of the groups. One of the areas that we feel we might need to focus on more is to maybe specify more about what's inside those inner working groups within the collaborative. The group recognized that you're rarely going to have one person just fit in one area, you know, at different times of their lives in different areas, they might fit into all of them. And so who specifically would be considered vulnerable? So kind of defining those categories. And then also looking at where do we feel that the current coalitions that are active fit into this collaborative. And so we're lucky to have some coalition members on the team that feel like it might just be working with the coalitions to redefine what our future goals and strategies might be with those coalitions, and also continue to recognize that all of the work is interrelated and we need to keep it focused on the big picture, the big strategy of wellness. Group, did I miss anything else? Lots of good conversation.
Yeah, I was
Yeah, it
just gonna jump in there, Abby, and say, I think it was Amanda Shoemaker who said, even for the coalitions to take a look at how we measure success, right?
Yes.
That was another piece that I think Amanda mentioned. And then I think on the overall model, somebody mentioned too that it's more of a long-term solution and asking more of the why questions
Yes.
that we don't always have the time to do. See how much I told you I appreciate you facilitating so I could truly listen.
That's
Thank
good.
you,
I
Abby.
appreciate that too.
Well, you both modeled good teamwork here. So let's go to the next group and have the same thing. I'm going to go backwards on 4. So Emily, would you start us off, and feel free to call on your team members for anything else you need.
Actually, I think Nadia is going to report out.
Perfect. Oh, look how well she already delegated. That's
Yes,
terrific.
that's me, a delegator by trade.
Nadia.
All right, so our group also had a really great conversation. They like the visual because it shows that we truly are working together under one mission of serving our clients, whoever they may be. That it looks like this approach would cut down on the number of meetings that occur, but get the same amount of work done. As far as being able to see their work, that they like the overlap, because that is reality, that a lot of those areas do overlap for clients, and that it looks like the areas tie together well. A couple of missing, or instead of missing, maybe clarifications or questions. One is really where does the data fit in, and how does the data feed back and forth? Maybe a representation of planning and measurement. So we had Diane in our group, and she answered that question, that really planning and measurement as a committee within the backbone would continue to provide support for the data and results-based accountability. And then clarification, we also talked about the definition of those work groups. So for example, who is a vulnerable person? Really just that would be defined by the community, by the collaborative. As far as what that is, we have not made those that specific of clarifications in those groups. So that would be defined by the work groups. And then the last part is just that the understanding of shared measurement. So that will be key in the work moving forward, is that we do have that shared measurement. So what is the plan for that? And how will the groups go about doing that? Did I miss anything, group?
I don't think so. Thank you for sharing out, Nadia.
Yep.
Thanks, Nadia. You know, that's a key piece that we can really rely on our planning and measurement team to help us think through. First part is figuring out what are we already measuring, right? And where's their crossover in some of those things? And then we can figure out where the gaps are. So this is great conversation. Thank you. Okay, how about Michelle's team, group 3? Think about what you would add that's different or in addition to what we've got here, and we just lost, but maybe we could pull that back up for folks to see that, what we've already got.
I think actually the notes that we have, I think they're mostly separate. We like the visual. The visual would be easy to share with the community, and I think that was Krista that really pointed that out, and correct me if I'm wrong. We're concerned about duplication of efforts, which I think that's kind of come up, but also the idea that there might be a need for, obviously, for overlapping in services, right? And so one piece that we think is going to be crucial is communication. And we wonder if there would be a way beyond just the committee to have some sort of like a Google Doc notification that would pop up when, you know, a group, an agency could report to the committee and to the coalition, I guess, and say, hey, we have a client who's looking for X, Y, and Z services, who can help? So there's that. And then Jamie brought up something really great. We have a real need for bringing in voices of lived experience in this. And so that might go, beyond our sort of professional situations where we're not necessarily, I mean, I can't speak for all of us. I know some of us have had experiences in these things, but I think it was a great comment, and the group vehemently nodded yes when she said that. So thank you, Jamie, for that comment. Am I missing anything, Martha?
No, I think you covered it all, Michelle. Good job.
Thanks for the notes.
Great comments. Thanks, Michelle. Okay, Jessica and Tana's team.
With Jessica struggling with her voice, I'm going to go ahead and report out.
Thanks, Tana.
You bet. So a lot of similar things that our group discussed, but some that were just a little bit different. One thing that our group talked about liking about the model was that it does pull community partners away from doing all of the work, and it allows the community to kind of support in that work. And then community partners is able to drop back and just be a supportive role. And we had another notion that it allows each group to work on a specific area instead of having to worry about fixing everything. If you think about mental health and all the different components and complex pieces, it allows a group to work on one thing, knowing that other community members are working in a different area. So it doesn't feel like they're holding all the work on their own. And then another piece was allowing us to bring people back to the table. We talked about how sometimes we lose members because we do have so many different areas that a certain coalition or work group is working on. When somebody originally comes on and that work starts to maybe get lost, or it's not the main focus, then that individual kind of drops off. And so being able to bring people back together when we have more focused work groups. As far as the second question, I didn't really have anything new to add. So I'm going to go on to the third on what's missing. Very similar to what we've already heard. Definitely need some clarification on vulnerable populations access, just those different circles. So that way everyone understands what all of those mean. And then in addition to that was when we do overlap those circles, for example, take a complex issue that fits in all 4 of those circles, how are we ensuring that the work's getting done and who's doing that? So again, I think it's just that defining the roles and understanding how we don't duplicate. I think that's it. I'm going to lean on my team members to see if I missed anything.
That's a great summary, Tana. And I think these are the kinds of concerns that others share too, right? We don't want to duplicate, but when you have a model like this, you start to see who the players are, and it makes it easier to really organize our communication and our strategies. So that's really helpful. Thank you. I'm going to turn it to the last group, group 1, and then I'm going to have to leave you. My apologies for another meeting, but I'm going to turn this back over to Denise and Nadia to pull that last group's thoughts together. So can we have Cheyenne go ahead and start with us?
Yes. Okay.
Sorry.
You're good. So kind of we've covered a couple of different things that we've talked about in our group. One thing to just kind of reiterate, we had a comment where, if somebody has one problem, they might also have all 4 issues as well. So again, just talking about that interconnection with everything. For question number 2, we just talked about how it kind of took us a while to warm up as a group, but then we started to kind of explain our background, seeing where we are coming from, how do we all kind of correlate into this group already, and just kind of saying like, oh, I work on the youth advisory board, so therefore I have a great perspective on what the youth want. I come from a school background. This is where I think is a need as well. So we've kind of already mentioned some of that, but what I wanted to kind of focus on what was missing from the model, we had a great posed question of the spiritual side. So just kind of pulling in the different churches that are around in our different communities, having 1 or 2 different voices from that, maybe somebody from Kearney, and then also making sure you're pulling in that rural area. As a professional, we might overlook that and just be being able to reiterate all of those resources that are already formed and out there within the community. You know, they might not be aware of our current work groups or our coalitions already. And then also just, you know, making sure law enforcement is still involved in these conversations, especially on that behavioral health side, as we're seeing an increase in needs for that. And then right as we were wrapping up, we were getting into our conversation. So we were kind of wishing that we could also hear more from the early childhood development side from our group as well. And then Wanda, feel free if I missed anything.
I think you got it. Yeah, as time was ticking down, I saw we had some early childhood folks and we didn't get their voice necessarily. Maybe we did get a little bit, but just making sure that they could see their work in that model. But yeah, we had great conversation. And when we talked about the spiritual aspect and how we would weave that in, I think I heard some of the group members say it'd be great to have maybe a champion or two with some of that expertise and to be able to bring it back to everyone and share out, because that is a key piece that we want to make sure everyone's aware of.
Well done, group. You brought up some very interesting observations. I really appreciate that. And I was sitting here kind of thinking to myself, as a collaborative, I do believe we could assess from time to time if we have all of the representative partners in our work, right? So if we're finding that we don't have faith community representative in the collaborative, we can start inviting those voices to the table, and so they can kind of see the work and the collective work. So I really, really like that. So thank you for bringing that forward. Great information for us all to be considering. I believe what I'm hearing is a collective approval of moving forward with this model. And I do believe I have a poll question I could send out just to make sure that everybody feels that way. But I'd sure open it up for any other conversations that you might want to have. And why don't I propose that if you have a comment, maybe just raise your hand, and that should be on the bottom of your screen, and then we can call on those who are raising their hand. So if you have any comments. Krista Fritzen, do you want to say a couple words?
Yes. Kind of it seemed that one of the objectives or components of this whole process was related to overworked staff with Buffalo and where your role is with Buffalo County Community Partners. And it seems like with this model, it's more doable, and maybe there's some specific roles like the communication piece, some of those things. So it seems like there's a potential using this model to take away some of the stress and some of the overworking components, possibly with Buffalo County Community Partner staff. That's more of a comment. The other question I have is, are we considering that if this model continues, that those other collaboratives would then join in? Like, if say I was with the Suicide Prevention Coalition or Healthy Minds, I mean, is there a place that can just, I mean, this breaks it down to 1 or 2 meetings. If I'm on the steering committee, then I'm still going to do that meeting, but then I would just be, this would be that meeting, that group, versus we're still going to have those other groups. Am I seeing that accurately?
I believe so. It's going to be a process, right? I think Amanda Shoemaker said it really well, and I don't know if I could grab her thought. She goes, as a person who's been on Be Well, what I heard her say is it's really, as a coalition, time for us to decide if we need to readdress how we're measuring success, right? What is success for Healthy Minds? And can we lift up the work that you're currently doing in that behavioral health work group to talk about this as the great work we're doing around this table? And others might pick that up. So it does lessen the burden of having a Healthy Minds meeting and a work group meeting, because you're lifting that work up into that work group. And there's more people there to help solve some of those issues, because you have that 360-degree look at the work that you're trying to accomplish. So I think there is a little bit to be said about how we lift that work up into those groups, because it's more than just the coalitions. There's other organizations doing great work around mental health. And then I think too, I think you're right on, Krista. I think it lessens the load for the staff. I think it lessens the load for you, feeling like you need to get to 6 meetings in a month to all talk about mental health and suicide prevention, where you bring more people together just to talk about overall behavioral health. And if we're all working on that together, what would that one piece be that we could all really focus on and be successful with? And I don't know that I answered your question real well, but I do think there's a solution in moving forward.
Well, in my conceptualization, it makes sense, and this group becomes functional because the action then would happen in those work groups. And what we already have was the collaboratives, or the coalitions that are already present. I conceptualize those are parts of those work groups, and maybe there would be a couple work groups within that they're doing specific duties. But in my mind, this makes sense, and this is worth my time. But if we're just going to talk about it and that's all we do, then it's, and I don't mean that, oh, in a mean way, but I just mean like that helps me get excited about this, kind of in reference to one of our other people's comments, Judy's comments last week. Because this really means that we're gonna not be duplicating so much, and we're gonna fill the gaps better, because we're gonna just make it a better system, not rehaul the whole thing. That was just my thought.
And really just having that conversation of how can we have impact? I mean, everybody on this call does a lot of work and has done a lot of work. We all have had thoughts of this would be more impactful if, and so this is kind of creating that space for that conversation of how can we take the work that you've done and take it to that next level to where we can have more of an impact.
Just one more last thought with that is confidentiality did come up last week as well as in this meeting, in our small group, is if we have this kind of organized effort, then could we not have one consent form or one form that says, hey, do you give me permission to talk to all the players? And then that way we don't have to tiptoe around. We can tag where duplication of services for particular individuals are, as well as then communicate with each other on a more specific basis and meet the people's needs better. And then we don't have to tiptoe around confidentiality because we actually have a form that's congruent and consistent for our whole working groups. Just a thought.
Yeah, we actually have some models with our community response team that's doing some of that work right now, and being able to assign a number to a person and have a coordinated conversation. And I think there's other partners on the group who have some products too that might be able to help us. I'm thinking like Emily Lehman with Unite Us. I think she's probably just itching to tell you how she can help with this. So I think there's some pieces out there, but until we start having a conversation about how could we all use at least one form or one single entry point or a coordinated entry point, I think then we're going to really start making some traction. I would say like right now, coordinated response is leaning very heavily on that amazing lady down there, Lisa Leith. And I know she's retiring, and Deb, I think, or Dee is sitting there next to her. So we look to Salvation Army and the Jubilee Center as kind of like our coordinated response for community response. And so I think there's some things we can put in place that are already starting to happen in the community. So yes, I could see that, Krista. So some excitement from Krista. She can kind of see the work that she has been doing has built into this much larger piece. And if she could reduce some meetings and still be able to help others and reduce suicide and support mental health services. I'm seeing some excitement there. Am I capturing your thoughts, Krista? Okay.
And still be hands-on.
And still be.
Yes.
Well, I think this gives you the opportunity, if you want to do some hands-on work, that you take that out of that work group. You raise your hand and say, hey, I want to work on this. Anybody else want to come with me? And you work off site on that, and then come back and tell the group what you've been successful doing, right? I think by building that structure around those coalitions, we limited the impact that they could have.
Just to kind of add to, I think this helps know who to go to when we have an idea, we're like, hey, there's a gap here. We know kind of more who to go to. Denise, I reached out to you months ago about bilingual data for how do we serve bilingual youth, because There's this growing need we have within our school-based program. And I didn't want to duplicate something that was already out there. I wanted to know what was out there. And so I think this model helps conceptualize all of that. Like, I'm in this area of mental health, I'm doing this work. Now we have this huge thing in front of us. Okay, I can go to one of the other work groups. Are they working on this? Are they not working on this? Who's a point person? I just think it streamlines that communication piece and knowing what all is our community is working on.
And I think a great use of community partners' time, the staff time, would be helping to coordinate that, right? Could we pose questions to the full collaborative when you have it, Jessica? So Jessica's looking for this. If anybody has an answer to that, please get in contact with her. So, some of those kind of questions that we can be more facilitators in those conversations. Good conversation. I am hearing great support about moving forward with the model, just out of the sense of making decisions. I am going to pose the next question if I can get to it. So do you support the proposed collaborative structure and moving forward? That way we just have a solid decision moving forward.
And can I clarify, would that be with some adjustments? So like we talked a little bit about representation of planning and measurement within that backbone. Okay.
Yeah, I think there's some steering committee members that talked about this last week and said planning and measurement needed to have its own little bubble. I didn't do that because there's other board committees and I wanted to take some time with the board to talk that through before I dropped it on that model. So that's the only reason I didn't have a specific planning and measurement bubble on there.
And then the other two potential adjustments related to lived experience, involvement, and where that fits, as well as spiritual pieces with the other two.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And maybe the model, now that I hear that, maybe the model needs to show what are those defined categories of people that are coming into this work. So there are people with education backgrounds, faith background, rural community, healthcare, things like that. So maybe that needs to be shown on the model as well.
Like you're thinking like a descriptor of participants in the work groups.
Yeah.
I mean, broadly, because some of our work goes among all of them, like we talked about. I like that description.
But even like Chief Wah, he emailed us last night and just said he couldn't make it, but he totally supports the work that we're doing moving forward. So, law enforcement would be one of those categories that they're involved, right? Okay. A unanimous decision. Look at that. Nice job, group. I think that gives the staff the support and the board the support to know that we're moving in the right direction, that we have the right models, and wonderful people are willing to work on that. So thank you so much. Matt, let's hit the next slide. It's going to be a surprise because I can't remember where we're headed next. Oh, yes, the work groups. So that is really the next piece, is starting to kind of flesh out a little bit about what those work groups are, how we start to convene those work groups. So that will be some of our behind the scenes work with our staff, with the board, and with the steering committee. To start with, we thought as we start to pull those work groups together that we would begin asking these questions. And we don't need to make any decisions today. We can actually email this out to all of you, but this is what we thought would be the beginning agenda for a work group that was meeting. So what I hear from all of you is that you like so far the work group concept because you've proved the model. We have some support of those issue areas, holding those conversations within those work groups. You still would like some more specifics as to framing, that conversation of that work group, like what is a vulnerable adult, defining that, access definition, things like that. And then this is the next question. What would be those conversations you want to start holding center as we start to bring those work groups together? So what if you were attending the, let's just say the behavioral health work group, we would ask everybody who is joining that first work group meeting to begin to share with us, what do you hope to achieve in the community? It may be a program outcome. It could be a personal mission statement. but what do you hope to achieve for those with mental health challenges or for overall behavioral health issues in the community? Then the next question we would ask the group is, who needs to hear what you want to achieve? So is faith community missing? Then we need to invite them to the next meeting. Is the rural community missing? We need to invite them to hear this. Is law enforcement missing? We need to invite them as well to hear this. And then the next question gets to your lived experience. How does the end user inform this work? So where are the voices of those with lived experience in this conversation? And how do we invite that work or invite that voice in this work? So those are the three questions we're considering to begin conversations within those work groups. Any feedback as you start to process that? And feel free to raise your hand if you're afraid you'll step on somebody's tongue.
This is Alexandra. I see purpose in the three questions. I'm wondering about, is it helpful to have something about why is it important?
Can you talk to me a little bit more about that, Alexandra?
Well, I always think about checking in with myself in terms of when I'm, what's the purpose and the importance? We know all of this is important, but as we start to drill into specific objectives or when you look at what do you hope to achieve, I think the next question is, and why is that important? I think that leads into who needs to hear and the impact it can have. And sometimes that why is it important starts to then connect and intersect with other initiatives or may intersect with other groups. I find that a helpful question to ask sometimes. For what it's worth, just throwing it out as an idea.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that more. That helped me get my mind wrapped around with what you were thinking. So thank you. Very good addition. My friend Adrian, I see your hand is raised.
Hi everyone, Adrian Gomez Ramos. I guess my group met me. I'm the community health worker at Healthcare Clinic. One thing that I really like about these three questions is the last one. How does the end user inform this work? For me, when we take a look at organizational structure, or in this case, the model that we have all accepted, where are the feedback loops and where do those exist? And I think for the longest time, we did lack that feedback loop in the system where we hear back from the people that we're serving. As a frontline public health worker, I know exactly what's going on with people and the struggles that they are going through, one-on-one personal stories, attaching faces to the stories. And that's really important for my work. And I've seen, up until this point, a lack of that feedback loop to be integrated into this organizational structure or model. And so I think this is, for me, the most important question to ask. How does the end user inform this work? Because I think at the end of the day, we're really trying to serve those people and we constantly need to be informed, have an ear to the ground on what's going on. So I really like that question.
Thank you, Adrian. You're doing such amazing work at the Healthcare Clinic. So thank you for sharing that. Great observation. And our friend Jamie from Families Care, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, well, and I was actually going to say something super similar that to me, I feel like that should be elevated to the top of the list, that should be one of the first questions to ask. And instead of the group deciding what needs to happen or what those objectives should be, that those people that we're hoping to impact would be part of that conversation and guide that work and inform that work, and be part of the process in building the systems and the projects that are completing that work too. So.
Excellent advocating for that lived experience. And we know when we hear people with lived experience, how important that is to the formation of those plans. So thank you so much. And Krista Fritzen.
Briefly, one of the things I was thinking of when you first reviewed what we had done to this point, Denise, is there a way to incorporate the questions such as, where would you be eating if you didn't take this lunch today? So you're getting the feedback right away, and it serves that question about, are we actually meeting a need, but also how efficient, how effective is this need? Are there other options? Do they think they know other options? Would they have done something different, et cetera, et cetera? Are there ways that we can ask those questions when we're doing particular activities to get that deeper level of information? And I don't know how feasible that is in that setting. Like, can you, as you're handing out a pack of food, a bag or whatever, get that question answered? I mean, can we have something set up that people can, I don't know. But just, I think those are the ways to get some of that feedback right away. And then is there a way that we can set that up afterward? And we kind of address this, don't we, some with what you talked about with the planning and measuring piece, right? But just some ideas that were triggered there by the last gentleman's comments.
Yeah, great observation. Thank you, Krista. And I think there is also a piece too that I haven't heard, but is somewhat related to what you're sharing. There are some communities who are doing some peer-to-peer education to help train peers in being that lived experience voice. And Jamie actually is building some really cool, really cool program with parents here in the local community, but I know Grand Island's building a model right now too. So there's some opportunities for us to think about how to help support those with lived experience to bring their voices into these conversations. So I think that's an element with it as well. Well, we're going to start adjourning this meeting. I will just refresh what I've heard, and then I'm going to lean back to Nadia because I know she kind of has a board response piece that she wants to share with everyone. So what I heard is we have approved moving forward as a collaborative. We have named ourselves the Buffalo County Wellness Collaborative, with the caveat that we want to make sure basic services is in that name, that's inclusive, and that we also want to consider if well-being should be there instead of wellness. So those are just a couple of pieces for us to think about moving forward. I do believe we have decided on the model, 100% approval rating on the model and moving forward with that. So that's fantastic news. I will tell you that we are going to go back to the steering committee to talk more about the specifics of the work groups. That's going to be next on their agenda. We tried to get to that with their last meeting. They met for 2 hours and holy cow, they made a lot of great progress, but that's the next piece for them to start digging into, is to start to build the framework around those conversations. I hear support in moving forward with those 4 work group conversations once we maybe bring some more specifics to that. And I think I heard a few tweaks to the model and definitely heard how important lived experience is, the faith community, and that rural communities are represented in this work. So Nadia, any comments on behalf of the board and the work that you'll be carrying and lifting throughout this year?
I think on behalf of the board, they were really just looking to the steering committee and to this collaborative to agree to carry forward the work that the board started. And the board looks to be supportive of this work and also to help to integrate the work that has and is being done within those coalitions. And so really just a willingness on your part to accept the torch.
Thank you, Nadia. Thank you, Nadia. I think that was one piece too. We wanted to be very clear in communicating to you, because that's one of the things that we're hearing in Collective Impact is continuous, consistent communication. And so one thing that the board did a year ago is they accepted the role of steering committee for the collaborative. And they just want to make sure that everyone here at the table knows that they're passing the torch to this newly formed steering committee to lead that work now that has been organized, and that they support the work that you're doing. And this is your project, right? They're your backbone. So the next meetings will be the collaborative meeting. We will again meet at this time. It's an odd time because our childcare providers have asked us to meet during nap time so that they can be a part of these conversations. And we had a great representation of our childcare providers. So we'll continue to meet next meeting at this time. And then the steering committee will meet at 10:30 on February 16th. So any other questions or final comments before we adjourn today? I will also stay on the call a little bit longer in case you have any other comments or conversations. Thank you for the heavy lift, you guys. Just thinking about all the work that you have done over this last 2 years and all on Zoom. Fantastic work. I'm really, really excited to start these conversations and see what occurs. So thank you. And we'll see you again via Zoom in February. Stay safe and healthy, everyone.
Denise,
Yes.
did you say February 16th?
Is the steering committee. So
Okay.
I think we have you on the full collaborative, Angie. I'd have
Yes.
to go back and look. I don't think we have you on the steering committee unless
Nope.
you want to be on another committee.
Nope, I don't need another one.
I think representing early childhood on the steering committee is Erin.
She won't be available. She'll be in Lincoln.
Okay. I think maybe she did tell me that. Tana, do we have another early childhood person on the steering committee?